Thank you, Rajani, and thank you, SAPACC, Climate School, Extinction Rebellion India, and I guess there's one more host whose name I forget. But thank you all for having me here. It's an unusual presentation for me, and you'll see why a little bit later. This is actually not the audience we talk to most of the time. But it's a difficult time to be a climate activist today in India. And of course, we've got COVID and we've got a government who really, at some level, may not seem to care so much about the environment. But there's also the larger issues of India seems to be meeting its Paris Accord sort of targets. We obviously have a lot of development needs. There are a lot of people who are in dire poverty. So we do actually need to expand our footprint in some ways. And there are people in desperate straits, especially with COVID now. But in general, most people, they see this climate crisis as something much further along. There are much bigger issues today that they need to deal with. And why should they be looking at this whole issue of why should climate become such an important issue when day-to-day living is really the question. But let me just switch to sharing my screen. Just give me a minute. Yeah. So just on the climate crisis, the real big issues, we've got a small pool of people, activists, who are concerned about what the future is going to hold in store for us. But the vast majority of the people have more immediate concerns. And really, the problem with the climate crisis is how do we get that vast majority of people concerned enough so that they put pressure on the politicians to change the way they handle the economy and the country generally. Now, I come from Goa Foundation. Goa Foundation is an environmental NGO, probably the best known of Goa's environmental NGOs, set up in 1986 and has been working on mining since 1992 as Goa's largest environmental problem. I moved to Goa in 2008 and got involved in a couple of social causes. But at some point, I got puzzled that while we had a fair amount of response, there was not much concern from the politicians that people, there were activists out there who were making these demands and people were actually supporting us also. And I began thinking about what's really going on here. Why don't they care? And finally, my conclusion was that there's a system of basically political capture. The politicians were buying the votes, and the funding was coming from a variety of kinds of corruption, and mining was really clearly the largest source of funding for politicians in Goa. And that's when my realization was, unless that money flow is stopped, it doesn't matter what cause you may have, because you will not get good governance because the politicians really don't have a reason to listen to us. So I looked around, found Goa Foundation, clearly the most effective NGO. We joined hands there. No, what is the problem with Goa mining? I mean, Goa Foundation since 1992 has been fighting it, but clearly Goa mining was going on. So mining in Goa has been going on for now 60 years. And, it's gone through its various share of ups and downs. But basically, it's been a reasonable contributor to the state economy. And of course, it created a bunch of jobs. Now, over time, the mining leaseholders have got better and better terms in the contracts, and they basically control the entire political system through a variety of means. There's of course lobbying and electoral bonds, and there's of course some amount of corruption probably on the other side also. So over time, we had a situation where the miners, the politicians, the bureaucracy, all of that was once sort of one integrated system. Now, and the mine, then when we had the China boom in about 2004, 2005, in the run up to the Olympic Games in Beijing, then all hell broke loose. Mining became really rampant. And when the people in the local areas protested on environmental grounds, what the miners did and in a logical manner actually is they went to the local leaders and offered them, why don't you buy a truck? And if you buy a truck, we'll give you a contract which is slightly overpriced, that being the implicit bribe. And of course, some of the leaders took that up, and the local population got split. Now, the problem is that the person in the city is thinking that we need minerals in our modern economy. Some minerals have to come from somewhere. Some of it could come from Goa. Mining creates revenue for the government, employment for the people. And if there are some problems with the environment and human rights, we need to resolve that. But mining has to continue. There's no way we're going to support stopping of mining, any of that. So basically, what happened is politicians, bureaucrats, miners, mining dependents, the general public were all on the side of the mining. And we had a small local population, a few people, environmental groups, things like that, who were opposed to mining. So that's when we got a lucky break. The Shah Commission, which was a Government of India appointed commission, came out with a report which basically indicted the entire system. Goa Foundation took this to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court put a stay on mining and started hearing the case. Now, in the case, one question that the Supreme Court asked us really sort of had us thinking. They said that intergenerational equity is part of right to life. Fair enough, but how do we implement intergenerational equity? Now, we were really puzzled and we really didn't know what to do with this. We looked around the world, and it turns out that the idea is quite simple. Intergenerational equity basically is what we inherit, we must make sure our children and future generations inherit at least that much. Ideally, we leave them a legacy. But consider what happens if we, the current generation, consume a part of this inheritance, and all generations keep consuming a part of what we inherit. At some point, nothing will be left. And that essentially is the system we've really had for the last 300-400 years, where civilization has been consuming, in this case, minerals, but you can see this with carbon, where we've taken a clean carbon-free or a low-carbon atmosphere and converting it into a higher carbon atmosphere. We've taken an ocean free of pollutants and are rapidly dumping many pollutants into it. So we are consuming our inheritance, and the day when nothing will be left is visible, and that really is the climate crisis in one way. So this is the centrality of intergenerational equity. Now, in Goa or in India, under the constitution, states own minerals on behalf of the people and especially future generations. So the state of Goa is responsible for implementing intergenerational equity with minerals in Goa. So did they do it? Did they implement intergenerational equity? We did a little bit of a study. We took the annual reports of the largest miner. It's currently called Vedanta. It was then called SESA Goa. We took the annual reports over 2004 to 2012, and we took the industry body statistics, GMOA, as well as the government financials, and we did an analysis. We said that we could have extracted the minerals whatever SESA Goa sold the minerals for, we could have sold the minerals for that amount, and we could have asked them to be a contractor. Now, how would the financials have looked over those 8 years if we had done this? These numbers are in rupees crores, and for the entire state. Over those 8 years, Goa exported 88,000 crores of minerals. The cost of extraction was about 31,000 crores, and the reasonable profit was about 5,500 crores because the miners are in business, they've deployed capital, they need to make a profit. We worked that out. I come from the financial industry, so there's a way to do this. It works out to 5,400 crores. So the total expense involved in extracting these minerals and exporting them was 36,000 crores. So clearly the remaining value belonged to us and the state of Goa as the owners of the minerals. So two questions. The first question is, how much should the state of Goa as owner have received out of this 51,000 crores? The answer is very obvious. It's not a trick question. We should, as owners, if the mineral was worth 54,000 crores, we should have got 54,000 crores. So 51,000 crores. The second question, how much do you think we actually got? This is real numbers. This is from financial reports. How much did we get? It turns out that the state of Goa received less than 5%. We received less than 2,400 crores for minerals worth 51,000 crores. We lost 49,000 crores. Just to think about it simply, for minerals worth 100, we sold them for 5, and the miners showed that as pre-tax profit on which they paid certain amount of income tax, but most of the money went to them. I want to explain the scale of this issue in a couple of ways. The amount the miners unfairly captured was more than the entire state government revenues over those 8 years. The state government got 27,000 crores from all sources. The miners got 31,000 crores of extra profit over and above the 5,400. So you can understand the politics that comes from this. The second way to think about it is, we of course lost 49,000 crores. The remaining 2,400 crores, we also called it as revenue or windfall profit, and that also got spent by the state of Goa. So the state of Goa's assets reduced by 52,000 crores, and the total revenues from everything was only 27,000 crores. It was nearly half. The loss was nearly double of what the state of Goa received from everything. So this is clearly an unsustainable economy. And the fact that the miners were getting something worth 100 for 5 is what drives the politics of all of this. Think about it, if you were a miner and you had a deal to get something worth 100 for 5. You will say, let me go in and extract everything before the people find out, because if they do find out, something like this is going to stop. So at that point, the people who are resisting on the ground, whether it is, you're concerned about the tree, the tiger, or the indigenous people there, all of them become anti-development. And the full force of the law is brought to enable this kind of a transaction to continue. So how do we stop such a system? This is the real problem we were facing. Let me just show you that this kind of a loss rate is not sort of unusual. We've looked at analysis around the world, and other than Botswana, you can see countries, Australia to Burkina Faso, South Africa, even the US and even the UK, loss rates are massive. This is happening around the world. How did this happen? How do such large losses happen? We've traced this back to an error in government accounting. When governments get royalty, they call it income or revenue or windfall profits, tax. But actually what is happening is we are selling our family gold, and the money we're getting for it is none of them. And as a result of calling it revenue, because we don't see that we're selling something, the entire loss is hidden. Now consider what would happen if Goa doubled extraction. So instead of 5, we would now get 10. Mining creates more revenue, so it's very good. Everybody will support it. The politicians, of course, are very happy, the more money to spend. The voters are also very happy, lower taxes, higher subsidies, maybe some roads will be built or some statues, but it's all good. But what's actually happening is we are selling something worth 100 for 5. We are making a loss of 95. If mining doubled, our loss has gone up from 95 to 190. If this were explicitly explained to the public, they would be held to pay. We trace this back to the government accounting standards, which are historical but are now codified into two sets of standards. The standards from the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board, based, I think, in Brussels, and more importantly, the IMF's Government Finance Statistics Manual. So we realized that we have to change these two standards if any change has to happen. And I'm happy to report that the first fund, IPSASB, is actually working on a new standard for natural resources based on our advocacy. And we're hopeful that we will get the IMF also to change its standards, because their primary standard is the United Nations System of National Account Standard, which is also now being examined for modification. And this change may also be looked at in that context. But this is an important point to understand, that the incentives are such that politicians or voters are incentivized to extract minerals. Now, I skipped the slide a little bit earlier. Let me just go back to that. Why are minerals so important in the climate crisis? Minerals are basically the supply side of the climate crisis. Extraction creates a huge bunch of environmental issues, may not be directly climate related, but definitely sustainability related. And waste disposal is the big cause of the climate crisis. Carbon is a waste from utilizing fossil fuels towards energy. So extraction is actually, the big supply side. Most of the focus has gone on to, who are the consumers of minerals or fossil fuels, and can we reduce consumption? But there's a big opportunity in looking at what's happening on the extraction side, and can we reduce extraction as well? The other thing to think about is something called Sin's dream paradox. Now we understood how the accounting creates an incentive to extract minerals, because if you take the mineral out, the minor benefits or the politician benefits or the general public benefits, everybody wants to extract minerals. So if you have a situation like today when everybody is saying, let's put a ban on fossil fuel extraction, any country which has fossil fuels is going to say, let me extract it today before such a ban comes into place. And it actually creates this paradox that asking for a ban on fossil fuel extraction or consumption will accelerate extraction of minerals and actually compounds the problem that we're trying to solve. So this is one reason that everybody interested in the climate crisis must look very closely at what's happening on the mineral extraction side. So let me go back to how do we try and solve this. In Goa, and this is actually now globally, I'm just going to explain how I try to explain to the people, so that you can understand how this is communicated, and you can also understand the power of the framework that we've developed. We have 5 principles for what we call fair mining. The first is the state, natural resources, including minerals, are owned by the state as a trustee on behalf of the people and especially future generations. Second, since we have inherited the minerals, we must make sure future generations inherit either the minerals or their full value. This is intergenerational equity. Third, if we decide to extract our minerals and sell them, we must ensure zero loss. If the minerals are worth 100, we must receive 100 for those minerals. Fourth, whatever we receive for the minerals, we must save for our future generations. We are recommending specifically a Norway style, it's a large mutual fund kind for everybody, also owned by the state as a trustee for the people and future generations. And fifth, Since we own the minerals, we own the fund created from the minerals, we own the income of the fund. So we are asking for this income to be distributed equally to everybody as a right of ownership, as a citizen's dividend, or also as a universal basic income in current sort of jargon. That's what it is. So basically 5 principles. State-owned minerals on behalf of the people and future generations. We have to ensure that future generations inherit either the minerals or their full value. If we decide to sell our minerals, we must get the full value. We must achieve zero loss. Whatever we receive, we must save for our future generations in a large mutual fund. And finally, the income from this fund, we must distribute equally to everybody as owners. Now, before going too far into sort of how this works, let me first explain some of the advantages of this. Firstly, this is completely constitutional. It relies on sort of the iron frame of the Constitution, what cannot be changed. The first 4 principles out there are actually the 4 principles in the preamble, and the other 3 are completely rights-based. It hits on many of the values and models that we really consider dear. It's of course ethical, it's just, it's right. Most importantly, it's fair, but it also captures a number of other things which I'm not going to get into. From a faith or a moral standpoint, a different kind of a way of looking at it, it embodies the golden law of religion, which basically says treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. Something like this, if it were done by our ancestors and we were getting the dividend from it, we would think that they were really good ancestors and we were being treated fairly. If we create such a system, our future generations would think we took care of them properly. And from a moral philosophy standpoint, it also is completely in consonance with Rawls' concept of justice as fairness and Amartya Sen's capability approach towards justice, because in this case, the capital that we are ensuring is safe for future generations provides capabilities both to us as well as to our future generations. But how does this change things? The most important of the 5 principles actually is the dividend. Now let me ask a question to all of you. How many of you feel in your heart that you own minerals? Now minerals are really conceptual. Even for me, I really don't feel that I own the iron ore in Goa. But I can guarantee you every single person on this call and actually every single person on this planet is an owner of minerals, because there are a lot of international minerals, and specifically we're working on deep sea minerals in international waters, which are declared as the common heritage of humankind, which means that every single person on this planet is a co-owner of deep sea minerals. Of course, in India, the national government is the owner of minerals in the territorial waters, and in most states, and like in states generally, the state is a trustee on behalf of the people of the state. So almost everybody is an owner in 3 different levels. Now the point of making everybody an equal stakeholder is now we all get concerned about what's happening with our minerals, and are we ensuring that our future generations are going to inherit the minerals that we did? What will happen out of this? Zero loss then ensures that this loss of 95, which is driving this whole crony capitalism kind of a complex, everybody now has become a stakeholder to ensure that instead of selling something worth 100 for 5, we sell it for 100. The incentive structure for the extractor now has changed because they're going to make far smaller profits, and everybody is not going to be sitting on their heads and watching what they're doing. So the bad extractors will leave the system, and only good, honest extractors who want to work for a reasonable profit and not for damaging everything, they would be left in the system. So we would have a better way of extracting. And finally, what happens is, even when it gets extracted, the politician does not have access to that 100. Because the politician has access to the 100, they will figure out a way to share that with the voters, and extraction will keep on continuing. So we are basically sequestering it away into the future generations fund, and then the income that comes from that is paid out equally to everybody as a dividend. So the politician, if they want to now, try and gain votes by offering a subsidy or any such thing, they have to explicitly raise the tax on the people, convince the people that whatever it is for the good. And if the people decide that yes, we want to pay a higher tax for building schools or something like that, that's a fair transaction. But they cannot simply, be like Saudi Arabia, take the oil, sell it off, and use that to fund the entire economy, because the governance connection is lost in that situation. And most importantly, think about how this whole system reframes new extraction. If somebody is thinking about a new mine today, when the politician goes and says, we are now going to extract our minerals and sell it off, the early conversation was, let's get revenue and, we can use that money for development of various kinds. Now the politician is going to say, we are selling a family gold, and the voter on the other hand is going to say, why are we selling our family gold? Are we so short of resources? Can we not save ourselves? Is this the right time to sell? Are we getting the right price? Are we making a loss? Are we saving the money for our future generations? So the number of questions that come up, make it much less likely that a politician will want to extract the minerals. This kind of a system can get much broader support from everybody. It's obviously economically superior because we're saving all the money, we're not squandering it, so our growth rate will increase. We'll have much lower inequality in the economy because it's not that a few people are capturing all this value and controlling the economy. Instead, everybody is getting a citizen's dividend. Inequality itself is a boost to the economy. It's politically, by and large, neutral. Whether you're on the left or the right, if you believe in equality, this completely, flows through on concepts of both, sort of private property. It flows through in terms of equality. There is a risk that eco-fascists who believe that, we are the sort of God's people and everybody else is, not correct. They might take up this argument and say, no, we have exclusive rights to the minerals, but that's a battle we have to fight in any way. Most non-profits across the spectrum will want to support some of this. So rights-based groups, whether it's children or any kind of disadvantaged groups, will see this as a better system because, as I explained first, the politicians will now listen to them better. And secondly, if you think about the whole system, the dividend will benefit any disadvantaged person more than somebody like me who's sort of clearly a very privileged person, and certainly the same amount of dividend will help somebody disadvantaged much more than somebody very rich and doesn't really need that money. It of course follows all kinds of moral principles. So any moral or faith-based group will support this. This is very important on the conservative side of politics. Groups interested in corruption and governance, and this includes groups like social organizations like the Rotary or the Lions Club, who are really interested in bettering society within the current framework. Groups interested in inequality, poverty, and as well as environmental groups like Goa Foundation. I'm going to talk a little bit more on the environment a little bit later. I'm sure there are concerns already about, we're talking about extraction and the fund. I'm going to talk about how we deal with that whole side of things a little bit later. So just hold your horses. But most important in all of this is, this communication is addressed to that 80% who basically are not very concerned about the environment or the human rights violations. They're concerned about their day-to-day life. They're concerned about getting their minerals. And the framework we're saying is, we're not saying stop extraction. Let's do it in a mindful manner. And let's do it in a way that benefits all of us as well as our future generations. And let's stop this entire corrupt system that is accelerating extraction and completely incentivizing the system. So what have we achieved in this utopia? Actually, quite a lot. Surprisingly, our national mineral policy, again, as a result of our advocacy, says, and this is a quote, natural resources, including minerals, are a shared inheritance where the state is a trustee on behalf of the people to ensure that future generations receive the benefit of the inheritance. So this covers both the first two, the first two principles of ours. The national mineral policy goes on to say state governments will endeavor to ensure the full value of the extracted minerals is received by the state. This is the third principle of zero loss. Right now, you can argue that the coal auctions, the way they're being structured, is violating this principle. And some states have taken it upon themselves to actually push this. Karnataka has taken the lead with the NMDC Donamalai lease, where they're asking for an 80% premium to renew the lease instead of auctioning it. The fourth principle, save everything in a permanent fund. In the Supreme Court case, there was an order by the Supreme Court to establish a gold iron ore permanent fund based on a new levy from iron ore plus a cap on extraction, and both of these were ordered on grounds of intergenerational equity. So that is also in place. Citizens' dividend, not yet there. This is part of our advocacy. But there are commons, there are cooperatives, there are mutual funds and companies. Everybody is familiar with the idea of a dividend. It's a very natural next step. If you own the mineral, we own the fund. This pays out the income of the fund as a dividend. So this is actually doable. The principles have been established, and we now have to get the political will to get this across the finish line. Now let me get to the next part of it. What are the assets we are actually inheriting? Because the incentives to extract are linked to all of this, as well as we are concerned from an intergenerational equity perspective to ensure future generations receive all this. We discussed the mineral value all this time. The second argument for extraction, second big argument is the jobs associated with the extraction, employment. And in our perspective, the employment associated with extraction is also an inheritance. Because once the minerals are extracted, those jobs are gone. Think about Kola gold mines. We've extracted minerals for over 100 years there, but the gold is exhausted. There's no more gold mining jobs available in Kola. If we hadn't extracted the minerals, the jobs would still remain. And both these points are very important because, when politicians say that if we don't extract minerals, we're losing out. We're actually not losing out because the minerals are in the ground and the jobs associated with extracting the minerals are still there, available for later. So nothing is lost if minerals are not extracted. Future generations will inherit both the minerals as well as the opportunity to earn income from minerals. Now, the third part of it is the environment and forests and all of that, as well as the local communities. Now, here's one reason why we think the 5 principles are very powerful, because if we can communicate that to somebody in a city who doesn't really care so much about the environment, but is concerned about ensuring intergenerational equity and is concerned that minerals are inherited wealth, then by extension, the environment or the forest on top of the mineral is also an inheritance. So now how do we deal with these kinds of inheritances? The environment, the health of the community, the society, the corruption, the prostitution, all the other kinds of ills that come with extraction. When we look at the environment, the first thing we want is to apply the precautionary principle. We need to identify no-go areas, clearly anything which is biodiverse or maybe sacred, various kinds of reasons for identifying no-go areas. Then the next thing is you need to put in appropriate restrictions when the risk is very high for various other reasons. Netherlands is a classic example where they had a lot of natural gas extraction, but the result is that the land has subsided and they're now facing a lot of earthquakes. And both of these are a concern in a country which is already below sea level. The third aspect is a slightly subtle point, but which came up in Goa. We had 100 mines running in a very small geographic area. So even if you control one mine at a time, the cumulative impact may exceed bounds. So you need a cumulative impact cap. And this is there in the National Mineral Policy. And one of the reasons the Supreme Court asked for a cap on mining in Goa was for this reason, to ensure that the cumulative impact is within bounds. The fourth safeguard is to ensure there are robust environmental standards and they are not being breached. Then, if there is still some damage, because if you extract certain kinds of ore, the forest will have to go. How do you do it in a way that you avoid that damage? Can you go into, instead of open cast mining, can you dig and mine underground? Can you then restore the damage that you've created? If you can't do that, the third option is to offset it, which is sort of the camper. I've cut a tree, I plant 2 trees somewhere else. Finally, the last and the worst choice is compensation by money. Because money is really not the same thing as a tree or any of the other kinds of assets, environmental assets that we've inherited. The same thing with communities, except that the first step is to get free, prior, and informed consent of the local communities who are going to be affected by the mining. Then you apply the precautionary principle. Niyamgiri is an example of a no-go area. You need appropriate restrictions with the primitive tribes in the Andamans where they are uncontacted tribes. You certainly don't want to go in there and start mining. Again, cumulative impact, so that the local population isn't swamped by an outsider population, and the culture and remains intact. And then in the polluters pay principles, you need to have offsets. If you take somebody's land, you give them equivalent land. And finally, you have compensation in terms of benefit sharing, district mineral foundation, and things like this. So how does this structure achieve fairness in mining? If you look at it, everybody is getting something reasonable. The miners are earning a reasonable profit, but not an excessive profit. The mine workers are still getting employment, but it's not excessive. They can't fight for a larger share. The mining affected will be impacted, but the impact is being mitigated in multiple ways, and hopefully they're getting adequate compensation at the end of it. The state has fulfilled its duty as a trustee on behalf of the people and future generations. Yes, they're not getting any money, but they have no right to any money. They can only tax the people if they need to get money. The people will get the citizens' dividend provided they have done their duty to future generations. And the children, most importantly today, they are getting nothing. But instead, in this system, their inheritance is being safeguarded. And finally, with the environment, at least the damage is being halted, reduced, mitigated in various ways. Now, can this be implemented? Which politician would implement something like this? We've thought hard about this, and we think there are possibly 7 or maybe more kinds of situations in which a politician may implement something like this. It could be a principled politician. The citizens' dividend and the structure has been implemented in Alaska by somebody who just believed that this was the right thing to do and pushed it through. It could be a politician at the end of their career who wants to leave a legacy. Just before they retire, they may try and push this through and say, okay, people will remember me for all time, even though I may have done things which are not right earlier. It could be a populist government. It could be a Bernie Sanders or a Trump even. We've seen this a little bit in Mongolia, but I don't have time to go into that right now. It could be a challenger politician who wants a new platform, something new to cut through this entire media discourse, and in a way, to sort of get a very broad spectrum of people to support it. It could be in a resource-poor state where a politician doesn't have very much to lose. It could be in a situation where extraction is now starting. So, there's a point at which people can discuss and put in a proper system right at the beginning. And it could be in a place where there's been a lot of conflict, ethnic conflict, and this could come in as a broad political settlement amongst the various groups who are fighting. This could be Nigeria, Lebanon, even Guyana right now. Goenchi movement, we started in Goa as a non-partisan political movement, and the intent was to try and see if we can get the voters to support us in large enough numbers that the politicians and the political parties would then support the manifesto that we had put out. And the way we had designed it is to get the politicians to sign up to supporting this entire structure, and then after they were elected, uh, then if they tried to do a U-turn, then our support base would force them. This unfortunately hasn't worked so far because we weren't able to communicate it and create that support base to then get enough politicians to support this or to implement it. So this is still a big challenge. We think it can work in the way we've designed it, but it hasn't been proven for sure. How does it connect to the climate crisis? The first is there is a certain amount of degrowth in all of this because you're putting in place no-go areas as well as caps on extraction, both from ensuring that future generations inherit minerals, the extraction work, as well as the environment and the other kinds of inheritances. But the deeper question is, why should we actually leave the minerals in the ground? Because if extraction continues, then at some point, we will bust whatever limits we have. The core reason that is really around the way we are framing minerals as wealth and this extraction as a sale of wealth. And our duty is to protect this wealth for future generations. If you think about the number of steps we have to do to ensure that we extract properly at zero loss, we save all the money, and then we have this fund which as it grows becomes more and more attractive for somebody to attack the country or somebody within the country to do a coup, take the money and become an autocrat. So the risk becomes larger as we extract more and more. So perhaps some people in some societies will say that, okay, let's keep the mineral in the ground for future generations. Maybe they figure out this. But right now, we are not in a position where we can achieve all of this. So we will be teaching our children. So slowly, we hope that with this shift in thinking, people will start deciding that it may be better to leave minerals in the ground. And consider this, which is a stronger nation? One which is selling its family gold to other countries so that it can import things and consume that, or somebody like India in the past where we used to export to the whole world and the only things we imported was really gold. So we were getting the wealth of everybody else and conserving our wealth really for ourselves. So every country, if they think that they conserve their wealth and import from somewhere else, over time you will find the amount of extraction reducing and the price of minerals going up. That in turn will reduce consumption. I want to leave with some learnings from our experience. What is the real moral reason for caring about, let's say, mining damage? For us, when we worked it out, at the end of it all, it came down to intergenerational equity. Part of the understanding of the system is to understand what are the incentives of the various people in the chain, and especially this large voter group whom you need to get onto your side. Can we come up with an alternative that works for most of the population and which is perceived as fair, so that we can get broad-based support for something rather than just trying to tell them that it's a problem, get scared. Why will voters care? And this is something that we haven't managed, but community organizing in our mind is important because we can have these webinars with a few people attending, but we have to get this message on intergenerational equity to every single person on the planet. Because everybody has to understand that we are basically inheritors of something and we have an obligation first to ensure future generations inherit that. Only then have we a right to consume the inheritance. So I want to leave you with three thoughts. Intergenerational equity is the key principle driving both the concern on the climate crisis as well as the concern on minerals and the resource curse, as well as the broader sustainability discussion. Minerals are a very important part of the climate crisis. It is the supply side of the climate crisis, and if we do not fix some of these issues, we can work as much as we want on the consumption end, but people will keep on extracting minerals because they'll consider it revenue, a way to get development, and every bit of mineral will be extracted and consumed. So we must look at minerals as a supply side. And implementing intergenerational equity in minerals is a good place to start because you can convince the climate deniers or the people who don't care about these issues that the five principles is a reasonable way to deal with minerals. But once they accept the five principles and the idea of intergenerational equity, then everything else becomes a concern also. And the idea of climate crisis is we are worried about the state of the world that we will, as I would, as a good ancestor, will I be a good ancestor and leave a good planet for our children? And of course, the youth on the call are concerned about what is the world that you will inherit. And this is one way, a good place to start without getting into climate and whether that will happen or not. This is something clear, straightforward, and practical that anybody can get into. Who are we? Goa Foundation, I told you. We've set up the future we need as a global people's movement to make intergenerational equity foundational for civilization. We've started with minerals because that's where we started and because we think it's a very good place to get people to understand all of this. And I head the research group in Goa Foundation, and we're looking at making that a full center for implementing intergenerational equity so that the research work goes on in parallel. So there are various ways to engage with us, but I think I'm going to stop right now and turn it over to Rajani and the group for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. I think I'll also put in all contact details and the presentation in the chat for anyone who wants to download and look at it later on. I've already had a lot of comments in my chat window saying wonderful talk and a very interesting way of looking at it. And now I know what you did as CFO at Goa Foundation. As an ex-CFO of ICICI OneSource, I mean, you really peeled the layers and made it like, sound so unfeasible to do mining. So how was, first question to everybody, please start putting your questions before I go with mine. It would not be fair. I have a couple of questions already. If you would like to ask your question yourself, put your name in the chat. If you would like me to ask questions, I can do it for you if you put it in the chat window. I think we have 3 questions. The attendee called Regional License can go first. And after that, I'll ask the other 2 questions. There's also a comment. Can you unmute yourself? Nupur, Regional License. I'm also trying to get them to be unmuted.
Give me 1 second, I'll just
change so there was a comment which said from the same person saying shared equity available with new migration trends and citizenship laws is definitely allowing some to be claiming ownership, while the marginalized communities still gets NEDA. Nothing. I don't know what that means.
Nada. Nothing.
Okay, nothing at all. Okay. The incentivization in this process acts as the cause of divide between the taxpayer-based ownership versus people of the land. So that's the comment. And
yeah, I'll just do a follow-up question. Thank you, Rajani ji, and thank you, Nupur ji, for doing this. My question is basically the fact that a lot of questions would be coming up in terms of ownership in general. We are trying to keep it in the soil for this generation and the generation to come. In our lifetime, and that's a human average lifetime of 80 to 90 years, we hold on to certain things which we think that is our responsibility, and then we forget about it because the British Raj has been working on a 1,000-year lease or a 999-year lease kind of a model. Now, India is not even in the top 10 in terms of mining in general. India's, what do you call it, like GDP from mining is considerably low in comparison to other things that are available. However, I understand that once a mineral is lost, it's lost forever, or however, we exchange that value. Most of the people who are wanting to be stakeholders cannot, because there are people who are Goa foundations of the country who are taking care of this, is what we feel. Now, when we have people migrating from different regions based on climate collapse or otherwise, coming into newer regions, how do we define this ownership to them? Because it's easy for ancestral knowledge or ancestral property knowledge to be imparted, saying that this is yours. But when we have an influx of ownership, or the version of ownership that we're going to go to, especially with migration, I don't think that it would be easy for somebody to get that. And that's basically, if you Kichumatra, get my question.
Yeah. Thanks. I get that. It's a very interesting question. How do you create the feeling of ownership when people, I mean, I grew up in cities, so I had no idea about, I had no idea about mining, frankly. So that we believe that there needs to be a lot of work beyond this kind of communication. So like one example I'll give you, in Mongolia, for instance, what they've done with people is to actually issue share certificates to the entire population. Another aspect could be when you get your dividend, it comes with government communication that, thank you for being a good owner. So it's not just, a dividend coming in. There needs to be a full-fledged, sort of rationale. So we see this actually as really a 100-year campaign, because we need to get people to understand this much larger picture of this whole thing. You own this, you have a right and an obligation. Now, specific to India, and it's a very interesting question, because we have people who migrate even through the year. They go back and forth. So, which state do they actually belong to, or what are they? What we, as a technical fix, what we are suggesting is that all the future generations fund be managed by the National Pension Scheme as a central body, so that if somebody moves from one city or one state to the next, the moment they update the address, they get taken off the Goa scheme and put onto Maharashtra and Goa. But of course, it doesn't fully answer the question about how we create the ownership, but at least a system can be created in which they are not cheated of their right.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's from Shubham. We know him from Mumbai. Thanks, Shubham. Yeah, next question. I think it's from Shrij, saying post-COVID times, there's a lot of pro-mining lobbies pushing for restarting of mining in Goa. So currently, what is the status? I would also like to know on the mining situation in Goa. And why not put this economics of mining, as you've wonderfully put it, as explained by Rahul before the assembly? People are only hearing the other side, that is their misery is riddled. Goa's economy is suffering because of the mining ban. So I would like to hear about this mining ban as well.
Okay. So actually the mining ban is a good start, because there is no mining ban. So what happened in the litigation was in 2000, I'll just do a quick history of it. 2012 Shah Commission report came out, Supreme Court put a stay. 2014 judgment came out, and the judgment said, I mean, other than the permanent fund and the cap, the judgment said that all mining after 2007 was illegal. So, and they ordered the Goa government to issue fresh leases and fresh environment clearances. Now, what is illegal mining? Illegal mining is theft. You've taken public property. So the law provides recovery of the ore, plus of course fine and jail, recovery of the ore or the value of the ore. So we wrote to the Goa government saying, first, please recover 65,000 crores because you can't deduct expenses when you steal something. So 65,000 crores is the amount to be recovered. And please, we now have no existing lease, so we can redesign the entire system in this way that we're suggesting. The Goa government, controlled by the mining lobby, they went and instead backdated renewals of leases, countering the Supreme Court order. There was some High Court order that they went under. We went back to the court. So mining started in 2015. We were already in Supreme Court, and Supreme Court came out with a second judgment in 2018 when they said the lease renewals were wrong. And please, they ordered again the Goa government first to recover 3,431 crores where the Goa government had actually issued show cause notices. It's a pretty large amount for Goa, 3,400 crores. And secondly, they ordered again, please issue fresh ECs and fresh leases. Now, there are only two ways under the law that fresh leases can be granted, either by auction or the Goa government creates its own government-run company. Both these options are available. They don't want to do it. And they're simply saying there's a ban. There is no ban. Now, the other question is, let's give people information. Let's give the MLAs the information. Frankly, the MLAs know all of this. There is no lack of knowledge on their part. We've presented, we met quite a few of them. We sent all of them our manifesto. There's been any number of communications to them. There is no lack of knowledge. What there is, though, is the lack of knowledge in the larger population in Goa. And this is something that, instead of asking us, why don't they know? We've made a lot of efforts, but now that you've heard it, can you take up the cause and make it widespread? Because only voters say that this is unacceptable and there is a much better alternative available. Only then will the politicians change their tune and stop saying there's a mining ban, and really get down to collecting money and doing mining in a better way. Or they collect, actually our entire Goa system is in a way that we don't have to do fresh mining for at least another 10 years. Just in undoing the damage, which will also create employment.
Rahul, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, Shrija here, Rahul.
Hi.
Yeah. So I have posted this question. I don't know if you have come across this opinion piece by this guy called Amber Timlo, who is the managing director of Formento Resources. And he has written a opinion piece which has been covered by CNBC. Okay, it's doing quite a round in the social media where he has used the exact same words that if you want to implement the Modi government's Jaan hai to Jahan hai, the ban on Goa mining has to be lifted, right? And then he goes on to say a lot of stuff. I think this needs to be countering by the data that you have presented us, because the people, the kind of data that you have showed us is something very different than the article that he has published in that, and it's doing quite a lot of circle and damage.
Yeah, and in fact, I had a webinar earlier today also. Amber Timlo is the head of the industry body, GMOEA also. So, and one of the largest miners. Now, in terms of, I appreciate that there is a problem in terms of communication. And this is where I guess people like you who heard this need to come in. There is any amount of information on this. The Goenchi movement, if you go to our website, in 2017, we ran 9 articles in the Herald of 2,000 words explaining this whole thing in great detail. But information is really not really the lacking kind of a thing. CNBC is going around and sort of trying to influence the larger public. But somebody who wants to understand Goa mining understands exactly what's going on. But if there is an information gap, please step forward and help us communicate.
Yeah. The problem is that they know their audience, right? We are the kind of audience that will visit your website and read, but they are targeting their audience. They identify their audience pretty well. That's the problem.
Correct. No, so maybe you or somebody else can then write a counter in CNBC. I mean, there are a lot of errors in that article. For instance, he says if you read it, 34.7% of the unemployment rate is the CMI figure, and then one last sentence later he says 30% of the population is unemployed due to mining. If 34.7 of the working population is unemployed, 30% of the overall population is much larger. And 30% of the population, it's actually, all of that is massively exaggerated. But, it's like a rumor, can you actually stop a rumor from, you know?
Sure.
But I mean, it requires much more support from the general public, and we really hope that people like you come forward to get involved in this battle. It's not something that, one or two of us can find.
Sorry, on the same note, I would like to ask, if they do want to go ahead with the mining, all that they would have to do is get the lease renewed by using the correct processes, and the government has to do its stuff of recovery of the 3,400 crores. So, I mean, this is something we see very often when government wants to just justify and say the court said something, but they relate as something else to the general public, so that the petitioners are looked upon as people who are anti-development or something else. We've seen this a lot in, for example, even a simple lake desilting process in Belendur, Bangalore. When we asked, in an open letter, citizens asked, where will the silt go? Because they said it'll go to a quarry, it'll go to Kolar gold fields, and we know there's a lot of toxic material in the silt. And when we asked them, where will the silt go, giving the math and the logic and how much silt is sitting there, we got to hear back from citizens as well as government and such news pieces who are not thoroughly researched or understood as, oh, these people are anti-desilting, they don't want to get the lake cleaned up at all. So this is something I think we all face when we ask questions. And the common thing I feel is, if only citizens are able to put on their thinking hat, sit through a presentation like this. Today we're doing it as a webinar, but then you have your website. We saw a lot of your PPTs online. There's so much of resources out there if you want to do the research yourself, right? So I think our job as activists or people who are looking at the climate crisis is to understand all aspects of it, but do the thinking ourselves. So I would like you to answer what else. I know you're telling us to take it upon ourselves, but what else?
No, I think you need to think a little bit deeper into what's going on in India in general. So why does the media, for instance, allow a poorly fact-checked, clearly inaccurate opinion piece out there?
Yeah.
So it gets back to a much deeper complex where you have a media which is subservient to the government, and the government is clearly able to do a lot of what it does, both through control over bodies that sort of going against people in various different ways. Activists of all kinds are being victimized, as well as the whole electoral bonds and things like that. Now, as activists, we must understand that each of these issues are our issues as much. I'm taking up mining as a very specific thing, but if I didn't do mining, electoral bonds would be as important, right to information would be as important, freedom of press would be as important, and we must actually take up all of these and understand the criticality, because if we don't fix these issues, I mean, our voice will not be out there. If our voice is not out there and everything if the IT cell wins all the time, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Okay. Thank you. I think next question, I'm also putting it in the chat for everyone. This is by Anil. He was wondering whether we could expect that miners who have profited in the past, will they pay their dues to such a citizens fund now? Is it only possible to make it effective henceforth, or is it backdated possible? Now, if the former is possible, suing the mining companies for these funds should prove a good disincentive to pursue mining in Goa as a start. So what has been?
So our point of view is there is a lot of money recoverable, and whatever is recovered should go into the permanent fund. The Goa government is trying very hard not to recover anything, but I mean, they have issued these show cause notices partly to show that they had issued them to the Supreme Court. So there is something that we can pursue, and we are actually have 2 or 3 litigations already in the courts about recovering for various kinds of illegalities. But this is true across the country. In Odisha, they've actually recovered about, I remember right, about 13,500 crores due to illegal mining from a similar case, common cause case. But there is nobody out there asking for a permanent fund. So no permanent fund has been set up. So that money has been taken by the state government and consumed. Ideally, it should have gone into the permanent fund.
Okay. Next, I'm just combining 2 questions from Meena and Francisca. Basically, Meena asks, what challenges have you faced during this process? I'm combining with Francisca's questions, which is also like an outcome. What are the reasons you think for the political and civic apathy despite campaigning efforts in Goa?
I think the biggest obstacle is that we don't really have community organizing or a grassroots presence, and we spend very little time in doing that. It's all fine doing webinars, but if you think about, how does Black Lives Matter get 1 million people on the streets? It's because they spent, 5-10 years going, creating a group of activists who go doorstep by doorstep to the neighborhoods, getting people to understand these issues. Now, in India, in the past, it was the communist movement, the left, which did this very well. I mean, it was partly trade unions, but if you go to Kerala even today, this community organizing was very strong. And on the other side, the RSS through its Shakha model has a very strong community organizing. So if the RSS at any point in time wants to get 50,000 people on the streets for whatever reason in Goa, they can do that. But we, on sort of, if I can just say on the progressive left kind of thing, we have completely taken the shortcut of saying that, we will just tell people and they will understand. We have to make that effort of creating organizations. This is not going to be easy. This is going to take a lot of effort, and we have to build bridges with a lot of subaltern organizations, like there are Dalit organizations, and there are Adivasi organizations, and there are various kinds of rights-based groups. And we have to go to them and explain that we are with them and they should be with us. Because if we are not with them, they will not be with us. And we have to be very clear why we are with them, to convince them that they should be with us. But this is not simple. This is not easy. This is going to be a lot of hard work. The second thing is, of course, we have to change the dynamics of media and all of that, which is also not trivial. But hopefully, there is still an idea of a viral video, and we did have the Mercury in Kodaikanal kind of win. So this could possibly go viral. Maybe some unusual celebrity worldwide picks it up and everybody talks about it, and that may be a way to blow it up. We don't know about the communication side of it, but I think the community organizing is something that we need to really think very long and hard and invest in that.
Yeah, thank you. So Meena also asks, follow-up to this is, how do you build sensitivity in the common man? This is with respect to, I think, the urbaners like us, like we've not given much of thought to mining and what it does. How do we build that sensitivity? And this is a challenge in every space, saving our lakes, rivers, solid waste management. So what has been your view? What's your view on this?
So it took a lot of experimenting. I just did a list the other day. We've done over 70 presentations, and it took a long while to actually evolve the communication to these 5 principles, which today I believe, like almost anybody on the world can, understand, agree with, and see that it can be implemented. So you have to be able to bring it down to a point where it is simple enough for everybody as well as compelling. Once you can do that, then comes the challenge of getting that message out to everybody in ways that they will, prefer, imbibing. So like in Goa, we actually put out a manifesto in 7 different languages. We try to get into the local forms of theater, into the song, not just in the usual, put it out in the newspaper or have a talk. We need to be able to try and access, because this is much more than just, sort of a technical argument. It's a moral, much deeper. We need to bring this into our stories. We need to bring this into our mythology. So we need to have many different ways. We need to have stickers on rickshaws. Every different possible way, medium we have to use to try and get people to understand it in the ways they understand it. Not everybody will understand it the same way. It's hard, and we haven't made that much progress on it, frankly. And again, we're hoping for people to come up with ideas and try and help.
Yeah, thank you. I think Priya Sule had a question on right now. Is it feasible to think creation of an alternate resources feature anywhere in the current plan? Do you need a moment of?
No. I was just turning a fan off.
Okay. Does the creation of current of alternate resources feature anywhere in the current plan? Understandably, I'm just putting that down here as well. Understandably, it isn't financially viable right now, but does it feature as part of equity of future generations? I assume it's alternate resources to the mind resources. So I'm really not clear. Priya, would you like to ask this yourself? I'm just reading it out from the chat.
Yeah, it would be good to understand what is the alternative resource.
Nupur,
so let me try and answer it. Okay, Priya's on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can.
Oh, okay, cool. So what I meant was, yes, exactly. Alternatives to coal. There's obviously a long way to go before hydro or solar becomes a part of the future. That's somewhere being positioned in this litigation.
So in this case, it was not coal, but I can't hear you very well, Priya. Rahul?
Yeah, let me try and answer it. I think I understood. So Priya's question seems to be like, what about transition minerals, which are, lithium, cobalt, various things that will be used in the renewable space? Because if you're talking about, fossil fuels out here for climate, then at some point renewables could also become a problem. And that's a really good question. Now the renewables, in theory, are recyclable. So ideally, we want to get to a situation where recycling should be the cheapest option. Renewable minerals would be the next cheapest option. And fossil fuels are the least sort of most expensive option to use. So, you get a lot of money put into the fund kind of a thing. But it's still quite far away. But again, once you start thinking in intergenerational terms, then you start kind of seeing that this is kind of the hierarchy. In Portugal, which is one of the largest lithium deposits in Europe, a friend of mine and I, we've actually written an article asking for this to be implemented for lithium there. And if you see a deep sea mining demand letter, it's there in the presentation. Deep sea mining is all for these kinds of minerals. It's basically for cobalt and rare earths of various kinds. And there also we're asking for the implementation of these principles, including the whole structure. So yes, we are concerned about all minerals, not just fossil fuels in our structure.
Thank you. So I have a question, Rahul. One is, what was the stakeholders, the miners, the mining companies, what was their view? What was their response?
Well, it's very interesting. We've had one miner who actually supported a manifesto, but he's a little bit of a maverick. And his argument was that, I don't mind doing it for a normal profit. I'm in business, and if if I get a reasonable profit, I'm fine. And I do have future generations, and I understand that this has to go on. But the largest, I mean, nobody else has directly responded to us, because they know that if they do engage in a debate, we've got, I mean, all the cards are really on our side. So they never engage directly into a debate. They write an opinion piece or have a webinar of their own. But it's never in a, in a proper debate kind of a format where we can like talk turkey and bring up facts and figures. That happens in the Supreme Court.
Have they used their resources to downplay the movement or bring the facts down with some, alternative facts? Have they
Well,
done?
they have alternative facts, like I was explaining, the employment is an alternative fact. They talk about revenue to the government, which is an alternative fact. So all of it is really like based on alternative facts, but they don't engage with us directly.
Okay. So, for example, for us, for common people like us in Bangalore, mining is seen as something extremely dangerous if you get in as an activist. So, I would also like to know if you guys are facing any threats and how do you handle it? Has being in the public eye being safe for you, not safe?
Well, let me put it this way. It's not that activism is risk-free, but I've never personally been threatened. But yes, it is mining and it is large sums of mining. But I think in general, the ethos in Goa tends to be a little bit more peaceful. Maybe if I was doing this in Karnataka or Odisha, it may have been more dangerous. But if you think about it, we're not we're not really saying that don't do mining. We're just saying don't do it in an uncaring way. And our real enemy is the system that's been put in place, this whole accounting standards and the fact that everybody's forgotten about it. So our discussion is really with the larger public who are co-owners with us, as well as the government and politicians who are our trustees. It's not really the miner. I mean, it doesn't matter who the current miner is. If you take that lot away and put a different set of miners with this system, you're going to get the same result.
Okay. What about the mining community itself, the workers? What was their response? Were there locals in Goa? Who was? Because when I once visited Goa and I was stuck behind truckloads who were waiting for entry, I remembered that most of them were not even from Goa. So what has been the view of these people? Did they view it as a job loss, as a threat to their livelihoods, which is typically the livelihood versus environmentalist argument that's put on ground? What is their view?
So, in a sense, the mining companies, one is sort of the long-term employees who obviously see that this whole situation is, threatening their long-term employment. So the Goa government did the same work themselves, they could take on these employees. The second part, of course, are these outsourced contractors, the truck owners or the barge owners, and plus therefore the outsourced drivers and things like that. Now, that lot, the truck owners especially are, it's a quasi-bribe. They tend to get paid more than the market rate. So Sesa Goa, in between, when they were negotiating the rate, they were offering 11 rupees per ton kilometer, and Sesa Goa made a public statement that if we own the trucks in Janita cells, it would cost 3 rupees a ton kilometer. So the mining dependents are being put forth as a set of people who are, in pain and all of that. But the fact is, mining has been stopped for 2 years. We've come up with a whole scheme of how mining could be restarted, and even before mining could be restarted, there are a number of mines which have been abandoned and need to be restored, which is an earth-moving job, which is exactly the same kind of work that trucks can be used for. But again, there's complete deafness. They don't want to hear this.
Okay. I also had a comment from Shubham which says that how about Portugal has been planning a giga factory since 2016. Is that in Goa?
No, I'll build on it. I'll just build on that question quickly by saying that what about foreign companies coming through and like their models which might just work because they're looking at something which is a 2050 model rather than a 2030 model kind of a way. And the second part of this would be incentivization in general. I feel like, as Rajani ji was talking about, the city folk are not incentivized. We would obviously want ground ground mobilization of any sort possible. But without proper incentivization, we will never be able to see it. While you talk about a fund or a trust or something that works centrally state-wise, it's still like local, like people cannot, like it's a barrier of entry without proper incentivization where, you know, there's a college which says, I'll pay you if you save us, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the incentivization. I don't buy that. If you think about the kind of numbers I've been talking about, I mean, 6 years ago, everybody was on the streets in India against corruption. What was the corruption? It was natural resource camp, right? It was coal and natural spectrum. So we were all on the streets. But today, nobody's on the streets for Goa or anywhere else. Right? So, I mean, you have to think a little bit further about incentivization. Different question. Why does anybody buy life insurance? They will never benefit from it. It is for the future generations. You know, why do all families in India effectively have this thing that what we inherit, we pass on? It's actually culturally very strong in India, this idea that what we inherit will pass on. But when it comes to minerals, nobody thought about it that way. Nobody even knows that they own it. Nobody knows they have a duty. So first we have to, get past all those barriers to get people to think about these things.
Yeah, I had one last question from a user who says, when your presentation talked a lot about the voters, what's the average voter profile of Goa? I mean, educated, middle class, they care about the environment because Goa is a lot about nature. So what does it take to influence the average voter in Goa?
In general, the Goan population is highly educated. I think literacy is like in the 95 plus range. And universal primary education was rolled out in the 70s and all of that. So, I mean, it's generally a literate population. A lot of people have somebody in the family working abroad also, so it's not that they even see what's going on around the world. But in terms of how to influence the population, frankly, I don't know. I mean, if I knew, I would not be sitting here telling you we haven't succeeded.
I think it's such a coincidence that the beautiful Western Ghats all along from Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Kerala, we're all sitting on this crisis, environmental crisis, which so came out to the open only when the calamity of the floods hit us. And now a lot of urban folks like us have woken up. We're calling it climate crisis, climate action. But all the while it was resource extraction, bad accounting done by governments in the name of jobs, revenues and all that. So I think, yes, as activists, we do have our task cut out. I remember personally, we all had at XR a group meeting in December, and that was just before the CA-NRC protest started happening. And then we all went low because we were like waiting for this to see how it was panning out. And I remember reaching out to a lot of activists and saying, this is something there for all of us. And SAPACC also does the same, because in South Asia, there are no, we really don't have a border for our rivers or our air or our, our soil. So this really is a global South movement that needs to be built up, and XR and Shubham's group and a lot of people are trying to do that. But I think events like CA-NRC in India, the COVID crisis especially has now led us all to be static. But I also see this as an opportunity where we've had wonderful speakers like you come on board and educate us on what we need to do and what we can take up. And but it's also very saddening to know that the COVID crisis has not changed the powers to be or the establishment to think otherwise, to sit back and think, why did this crisis happen in the first place? Because the COVID crisis is a environmental crisis too. So this has, I didn't want to ask you a COVID question, but what do you think will happen post-COVID?
I mean, COVID is like a huge curveball. It's very difficult now to be talking about future generations and everybody's worried about tomorrow. So it's certainly like set everybody back. And it's difficult. It's like COVID is very hard to tell what's going to happen after.
Yeah, but I think as environmentalists, the message that COVID is related to the environmental crisis. It was caused due to the zoonotic diseases, this pandemic being something we've never seen before. So our effort has been to get on board scientists who are studying zoonotic diseases, understand it, so we can somehow connect the dots back. I mean, it's a living earth which is responding back to all the actions that we've done so far. If you can put it in some way, like you've done the mining crisis to the government and to common people, I think that should also help us. And in India, we're now sitting on the EIA 2020. So my question would be, next question somebody's asked is, would this affect the EIA 2020 draft notification? Have you looked at that, and how would it affect you?
On the EIA draft notification, well,
Rahul,
we do have a comment that...
Would you like a short break? I'll just give people your email ID and Facebook, the PPT link. And I think we have...
Can I take a minute break?
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Nupur, for putting Rahul's mail ID. He can be reached at thefutureweneed@gmail.com. It's there in the chat window. The presentation also has been shared on the Google Drive link. There is an Facebook page where we keep posting our webinar series. Please follow that page. It's SAPACC, that's South Asia People Action on Climate Change. WhatsApp group link. You can join to stay in touch with the group which is working on climate school and SAPACC webinars. Thank you everybody for attending this. I have 2 more questions. Francisca, please stay on, and if you would like to ask, you can unmute yourself and ask. Nupur, can you unmute Francisca?
Everybody can unmute themselves right now, since we are right now a safe space.
Yeah. So I think we have one more question from Anil and then Francisca. Francisca, would you like to ask the question yourself, or else I can read it out for you?
No, I can ask it. Thanks, Rajani. Actually, what I said, which wasn't framed as a question, was in response to Anil asking me about the skits that have been done related to mining, like if they explain the future fund concept. And I also realized that I myself don't know whether there is a connectedness between the Goenchi Mati movement and other attempts that I'm aware of to raise awareness about the mining issues, because I've read about in the news, I've read about different movements which have sprung up in response to things in specific parts of Goa, but I don't know if there's like a link between them or a coalition or anything like that, and I would like to know.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Anil, for attending this, and we look forward to having you in coming webinars as well. I would like to listen to that answer as well, Francisca, because I think as Extinction Rebellion, one of the key things was to stitch together all the movements. And I think in my personal experience, there's no shortcut to that. When we try to link up two movements, it's basically we're talking about people. So, and I think that's one of the most important challenges. Yes, Francisca. Rahul, back. Yeah.
Yeah. What questions?
Yeah, Francisca.
Hi, Rahul. So we were discussing, Anil was asking about using theatre as a medium to raise awareness, and then I remembered that Hartman D'Souza had a theatre or has had a theater group that would do skits on this. At least I had heard about that. And then that led me to wonder that if, these various movements against mining or attempts to spread awareness in Goa have been linked under a coalition or some kind of solidarity. Because even today I read about some agitation in Kepe which was related to mining. Yeah, and I was just wondering if there have been links.
Yeah, no, so there's definitely, there have been attempts in the past to create links in groups like that. It's not always work, but it's a small society and people are in touch, so it's not that we're not connected up. On the theatre side, I should mention that the one of the most popular theatres. So theatre is the local Goan theatre form. And there is a guy called Francis de Toué it's a very political kind of a theatre form. And Francis de Toué is considered the Amir Khan of Goan theatre, as well as the best political songwriter. And in 2017, before the elections, at least we got him to write one song, or he actually wanted to write a song on this whole issue for us. I'm not going to bore you guys with it, but it's my caller tune on the Goenchi Mahati phone. So yeah, but we've done it once only. We need to get to many more of the directors and script writers and to get them to tell the story.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Francisca. I wanted his name so I can look him up. How do you say that? Francis Tituem.
Tituem, T-U-E-M.
Okay, yeah. So Meena says, sometimes I wonder if different movements, water, mining, solid waste management, handicrafts, they all share a thread of exploitation.
Yeah, that they do, and they're all in some ways linked to inheritances, either natural resource or cultural. And but in a sense, that's the nature of modern world, right? You try to keep improving things, and at some point, and it's the nature is that if you can outwit somebody else with a smart deal or a smart way of communicating something, then it's fair in the system. So we have to change these kinds of basic underlying principles. It's not just good enough to say that it's unfair. How are you going to change that underlying thing is what we really need to worry about and solve that.
Yeah, and how do you integrate them together? I think, in my view, movements like Extinction Rebellion, SAPACC, are looking at the climate crisis, but underlying it's the trade unions, farmers, people who work from home with their handicrafts, cultural organizations, Dalit rights, human rights. All of us need to integrate together. And that was the goal of most movements, I think. Like you rightly mentioned, we need to be integrating, create a movement like Black Lives Matter doesn't happen overnight. So if we are looking at an environmental movement spanning across all areas, then we need to do something. Yes, Meena, go ahead and share. Unmute. Yeah, you can go. You can speak.
Sorry. So someone shared with me a collection of their CDs, right? And I have around 1,000 CDs in them, probably, right? That person is also very, a conscious, environment friendly, everything, right? In their own way. So for me, it's always, I see this and I see the irony in all of it. And then I just don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, actually, it's always a challenge, because when we set out, we want to do a lot, and then you realize the lot comes from within you. And then then that gap between you and the others keeps increasing. So I think, Rahul, here I'd really like to know your journey from CFO to Goa Foundation Mining, if you're willing to share. And there's a last question. I'd like to also say that this is the last question I'm taking because it's 8:15. How much contribution, out of curiosity they're asking, has NRI or the seafarer community contributed to the mining movement, like the theatrist? Joe asks that, Joe Fernandez. With that, I'll leave the house open to you to.
Yeah, to be honest, Joe, I'm not sure actually. It's very hard to tell, who is from the seafaring community or not. But I can tell you that, like, I did a set of videos with one seafarer who was also an amateur sort of camera person. And he's like, the two of us sat down and we just like, I spoke and he videoed it. And we got a whole series on this, about 80 minutes of video. I know for sure that Delson is a seafarer who helped. But beyond that, it's really hard to tell. You see a name and you can't tell, who they are, what they're doing. Rajani, in terms of the journey from CFO to Goa Foundation, I really told you that. I moved to Goa, I was got involved in certain social causes, and then realized that if anything has to happen, you need to, go much higher up in the system and fix problems there. I could have gone and tried to fix the electoral bonds at that time; it wasn't yet there, or something else. But mining was something at the Goa level, which was, in my mind, a linchpin to the whole governance.
Thank you. One last question was there. I had missed it out. The fishing community, how did they, because they're very active in Goa, did they not speak up about the issues faced by mining? Were they your active supporters? Are they part of the community who's with you?
So the fishers can be it's not just fishers. Again, in Goa, there are kinds of fishers. There are taller fishers, smaller fishers, there are people who go by the, so the smaller fishers have long, the Goan fisher community has been one of the spearheads of the National Fish Workers Forum and Fish Workers agitation, I think in the 70s. So that community is very strong, and it is very, they're brother-sister kind of communities. I can't say again specifically that the fisher community came out and did something, but it would be wonderful, in the Bangladesh war, this originated from way back. The Quakers in the US were very against the Bangladesh war and the US support for, the Pakistani side on that. So what they did was, they went to the harbor where the ships would be taking weapons and took out canoes and said, we're going to do a blockade, and started, practicing for all that. And in that process, spoke to the longshoremen, the lascars, as they call them in India, the people who worked on loading the ships, and got them onto their side. And eventually, one reason that the US did not send arms to Bangladesh to support the war effort was because these guys were effectively threatening to block the whole river and the channels, and also make that into a larger issue. So something like that happens with the fishers in Goa, we would love it, because most of it goes on barges, on ships to China.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I think we come to end of the questions also. Anything else you would like to add, Nupur, or anyone here? Please, you can unmute yourselves. We've now kept the thing free for everyone. Rahul's email presentation has been shared. Thank you.
Yeah, just my last page, guys. Intergenerational equity is key. Mining is a good place to start, and it needs everybody involved.
Yeah. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rajani. Thanks, Nupur. Thanks for this opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, good you all are doing this. It's much needed. And yeah, there's a long way to go, of course, for all of us. But we'll get there.
I think one important understanding both me and Rajni would have had in this series, not just with your session, but everybody else's, is we need to have a safe space to have these discussions. We need to have a space where I can ask silly questions or ask rude questions and still expect a reasonable and a logical answer. And that somehow is missing in our mainstream media. This is just a small attempt to achieve that.
Yeah, and we have to keep pushing at it. It's not going to happen with one big shot. It's to do many, many little things to, as in say, boon boon se, manta sabar. It's really that. Good, you guys are doing this.
In fact,
So
we
much
have
for joining
invited
us.
almost all our sessions. We invite the media folks that we know who write on environment, but they don't attend. They don't have the time because they have to get their uh, next breaking story, which is usually their beat. Is it trees? Is it lake? Is it river? That's their beat. We know their challenges. So climate
So
schools first design was for environmental writers, actually. So from then we moved to us and anybody who wants to attend.
yeah.
But your session was really eye-opening, and I'm really thinking of putting something together for kids who are in the age of 14 to 16, the Greta Thunberg types, and make a presentation and so that they can ask the right questions. We have elections around the corner in some states, I guess. When is Goa election next?
Rajni, I like the thought that how do we make extraction of minerals more expensive than recycling of minerals? That's like a big one there, big,
Yes.
huge one there. And while there's a lot that SWM is doing, I don't know again if they have thought of it in those terms, right? I really don't know.
I mean, think about it. That silk we were talking about is full of minerals, right? And it will
Yes.
have a lot of these kinds of.
In fact, we had experts, including my chairman, Bangalore Environment Trust, Dr. Yellappa Reddy. A lot of people gave them plans on how to extract them and create a parallel economy so that you can desilt your lake, rejuvenate your lakes, keep that income, that revenue to look after the lake for future. But they don't want it because they want this contractor mode solutions, which will then get them tenders and the usual stuff. In fact, in lakes, we even have, I don't remember the percentage, but apparently you can harvest gold from hyacinth. It's a very, very small part, but there are plants which give a lot of such scope for extraction. So they don't want to hear it. And they have the best of brains helping them out. They have IASC and the scientists, they take all the suggestions, but they don't implement it. That's been our challenge, I think, in a city like Bangalore, where we have a lot of scope for giving suggestions, but finally we feel unheard because it's not put into practice. That's been our challenge. And that's why I think
that whole voter engagement is a huge missing link. We're trying to, you can do only so much with advocacy. We've done a lot, as you can see, with our advocacy, but getting it across the finish line is going to require voter engagement. I don't see any way around that.
Yeah,
they do small things, but the big things will not happen without the voters.
So, Meena, we'll need our own TV channel, Meena. Radio channel, TV channel, website. This has been playing on our minds. I've been talking to a lot of young people who come into the movement, who want to do good content, who want to work with TV and radio or whatever. But yeah, how do you cut across through all the noise that's coming on general TV and media? I think that's also our challenge.
Well, if you've got some youth like that who want to look at this video and try and convert that into content, we'd love it because, and as I said, we've not managed to get the large population going. But I think it's a matter of also trying different approaches. There's one person trying to get maybe 3 approaches. If you have 20 people trying, you will get 100 approaches. And something will work. We learn from that.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for
Okay.
that. Yeah. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for staying
Thank you,
on so
Rahul.
late. And
Thank you.
thanks,
Bye.
Rajani and Nupur and all you guys. Yeah. Thanks.